I need to make this small. Something to be aware of is that I can't see anything in chat. Because this is kind of information dense, I would ask that you try and either ask questions in the chat, and our moderator Finna will help with trying to get those in, and or that we just kind of do questions at the end is probably the easiest, because I just can't see them in the chat. Okay, so this is the dog. He might start barking at some point, although we are outside sunbathing, so I think we should be okay. Oh, all right, there we go. So welcome to scheduling for the known world. In this class, we're going to look at sort of my approach to scheduling across multiple time zones. So this is, we're going to have a little bit of a focus of kind of when you are looking at, say, like a known world collegium type event. But even if you're not doing that sort of an event, it is still something that I think you can apply to even one-off classes to try to provide the most access to people around the world by just kind of strategically choosing times. Okay, so first I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Talina di Giuseppe da Fiesole. I'm from the Barony of Rivenoak and the Principality of Sinagua in the Kingdom of the West. I have been playing for a little over 3 years, so I'm still pretty new. I serve as Baronial Exchequer and Prima Consortia, which is the head of Baronial Court here in Rivenoak. So why am I teaching this class? So I was the co-event steward for the very first virtual Known World event, which was the Known World Italian Salone di Fiesole. And I was also the class scheduler for a Known World Collegium, which was a brand new event, never happened before. Actually, we won with the Italian Salon, hoping that people would be inspired to take on virtual events. No one knew if we could do it. We planned it in like 2 weeks, and as it turned out, it's really doable. And we all know this now because we've all been to tons of online collegiums, but back in March and April, we didn't know. So we actually had somebody who attended the Italian Salon and decided that their little specialized world should get a known world event. So the Colegio de Iberia was not an event that had ever happened in person. It was conceived of entirely as a virtual event. And one of the things that happened is that it ended up being co-stewarded between the West and Lockhawk. So folks who are on completely different time zone schedules. So what we decided to do with the event was actually run it on a 24-hour schedule. Instead of most virtual events that you go to are scheduled in the same way that you would schedule an in-person event. So say you have 40 classes. If you were in a church having your event in person, you had 40 classes, maybe you had 10 classrooms, you have 4 classes going on, and you finish the whole thing up in a matter of like 5 hours, right? So in, yeah, that math didn't work, but we'll ignore that. So what we decided to do, because when you do that and you take your whole event and schedule it over the course of 5 hours in whatever your personal local time is, it means that there's always going to be a portion of the known world who every single one of your classes was in the middle of the night. For a specifically known world focused event, we didn't want to do that. So what we did was we took the 40 classes that we had and we spread them out over, I think we had 28 hours worth of class time. And what that did was it meant that every single, like no matter where you were in the known world, you had the opportunity to attend a class live during reasonable waking hours. And so that experience of figuring out how to do that is what I want to share with you, so that people don't, if they want to do that, they don't have to start from start from scratch. The other thing I will mention is that I do host a weekly sewing night in the SCA virtual classroom, which is every Wednesday. We have some lovely East Kingdom friends that start us off at 4 p.m. Pacific time, which is -8 UTC. That is 7 p.m. Eastern time. And currently that is 10 a.m. Australian Eastern time, if you were wondering. Okay, so let me give you a little overview of what we're going to touch on in the class. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over some vocabulary. So we're all speaking the same language. We're going to look at the tech tools that I have used. We're going to walk through that process of making a class schedule across the time zones. We're going to touch a little bit on some little tips for if you are doing kind of a complicated schedule for during the event, and then we will move into questions. Okay, so let's get started. First off, we've got this lovely map, and the first thing we're going to talk about are time zones. So we're all probably fairly familiar, but they are just how we split the world up so that 2 a.m. is night everywhere. So this map, and I'm going to give you a big caveat. I made this presentation in the summer when a lot of places were on daylight savings time. So this is not currently accurate. That's okay. You get the point. I didn't want to remake everything. But this map actually shows us all the time zones and how they break up. You can see they don't quite line up to the images on the bottom, and that is because of daylight savings. Okay, so the next term we're going to talk about is local time. Local time is just literally your time that you are functioning in, and obviously it can be impacted by daylight savings. So whenever I refer to local time, I'm just saying whoever I'm talking about, their time that they function in on a day-to-day basis. Okay, and of course, daylight savings time, which is the bane of anybody that needs to deal with time zones. It's a 1-hour adjustment to local time. It's used to make daylight hours a little bit more consistent with working hours. One thing to be really, really hyper aware of as you are scheduling, especially when we come into kind of the season when these things might change, is that while most of the world observes daylight savings time, it starts on different days. So I'm going to show you a scheduling app. And that sort of thing is a great way to make sure that that you're getting the right time for the date you're planning for, because it might not be the same as the right time when you are doing the planning. Okay, and the last term is going to be kind of a big one, but it's really important. It's Coordinated Universal Time, which is abbreviated as UTC. And because I think it's abbreviated from French. So it is basically a base time that we can easily reference local times to. And this map is actually a UTC based map. So you can see UTC here in the center. And then as we go this way to the west, we are negative UTC. So those are times that are ahead of or earlier than UTC. And as we go to the left, backwards to the right, we get plus on the UTC. So those are adjustments where their time is ahead of UTC. If that sounds familiar, that is because you probably learned about GMT or Greenwich Mean Time in school. GMT is so UTC took over GMT. You'll still hear people say it, but GMT is actually a time zone that observes daylight savings. So we have switched to using UTC as our standard because it doesn't move. So it is a little bit easier. So I have grabbed this little shot, and I will tell you about this website in a sec, but it shows us, I have taken UTC as my base time here, and again, this was done during daylight savings, so things are an hour off, but you will get the gist. So in San Francisco at that point, they were -7 UTC. Right now we're -8. New York was -4, but Sydney, Australia is +10. So during daylight savings time, that means that the time in Sydney is 17 hours ahead of the time in San Francisco. So when it is Friday evening here on the west coast of North America, it is Saturday morning down in Australia. All right, so now we're going into tech tools. World Time Buddy. This is my favorite website to use for looking at time adjustments. It's worldtimebuddy.com. They also have an app. I have it on my phone. It's very handy. I do a lot of things with folks outside of my time zone, so it helps me kind of look up. So their free version will allow you to put in 4 different locations and compare them. And you can then, it's literally made for scheduling meetings. So you can pull this bar across and see how any time that you are considering lines up. Okay, so that is a really great one to use. And the other thing it allows you to do is choose a date. So even now in February, if I am thinking about something that's going to happen in March, I would put in the March date. That way, as people change times for daylight savings, it will make those adjustments for me, and I don't have to put a lot of thought into it. Okay, so the next tech tool is going to be either Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. I have a very strong preference towards Microsoft Excel, but some people do use Google Sheets. There is probably an open office product that would do the same thing. Sorry. Either way, using a spreadsheet is going to allow us to easily manipulate data. It's going to allow for sorting and filtering. It's also going to allow us to use functions. This here that I've got is in fact the conversion to make Excel calculate times using UTC adjustments. That's a lot easier than doing it manually. And if you happen to have a WordPress website as your website for your event, you can actually copy and paste straight into a table, which is really handy. So I might pivot something, say class descriptions, and be able to copy and paste, which is really handy. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at are tools that are in the Google Suite. You might notice throughout my screenshots that I've got like a fancy little westkingdom.org email. That's just because our kingdom has a Google Suite. All of these features are available with every Gmail account. If you are planning a very large event, it's really handy to have an email that is for your event that all of your key stewarding team has access to. All Gmail, so either through your kingdom or through Gmail, whatever is appropriate for your group. All Gmail accounts do come with a Google Drive as well, and that allows you to have somewhere to dump stuff so that you can share. If you are in a kingdom that has a Google Suite, or you can get on Elsie's good side, you can also get additional shared drives to be able to store more stuff. Okay, so the first tool in the Google Suite that we are going to look at is forms. I had to take 2 little shots, but when you click on this little grid in Google next to your like name icon, if you scroll down, you get forms. They're going to allow us to make a shareable survey, and we can take those results and open them up as a spreadsheet, which is super duper handy because I don't like retyping things. We are, in this particular method, we're going to use a Google Calendar. Calendars are really nice because it can be shareable. if you make an update to the calendar, it can update lots of places in real time. And the calendar can be embedded on a website so that live updates, even during your event, are captured. And also attendees can take that calendar item and export it to their own Google Calendar if they use one, and that will help them be able to see things in their own local time. And then the other thing that we are going to at least touch on here is Google Sites. And depending on where you host, where your website for your event lives, and you do really need a website, don't depend entirely on Facebook. Google Sites is a really easy way. You'll notice the site for this particular event is a Google Sites site. It's really easy to use. I do have one really important note about Google Calendars. They are very wonky on mobile devices if you are a person who is logged into a Google account. And when you embed a calendar on a website, very much like this particular event, it fixes all of that wonkiness, but be prepared to use an alternate method to your teachers and staff when you are in that stage where you haven't published it yet. Okay, so our next kind of set of tech is more about communicating out than it is about the planning process. So we have...
So really quick before you get started on that, then one of your participants said that the Open Office and LibreOffice have Excel type capabilities in case you needed those. There was also a question that you might get to, but one of the people had to leave, and they were hoping that you could address if it's tangible to the topic, if you have a chance, could you touch on how we let one another know across kingdoms, hey, we're thinking of a big virtual event on the July 23rd, and we don't want to conflict with similar events across the known world?
Yeah, unfortunately, that doesn't exist yet.
Okay.
I hope that it will in the future, but it is not something that exists at this point in time. So is one we can address, but it is kind of a little bit tricky because we've never had to worry about that before. Okay, so I'm gonna get back into these tech tools. So these are our components for kind of communicating out. I'm going to refer to Facebook. Yes, there are other avenues like Discord and things like that, but at this point, Facebook is probably the most likely. So that's what we're going to say. So most events will have an event on Facebook. So during your actual event, one of the most useful ways to use that to communicate is to give some sort of real-time, hey, starting in 10 minutes, updates that include things like class names, links. There's two ways you can provide links. You can give an actual link to a Zoom or a Meet or whatever platform, or you can link people back to your website where everything lives. That is a little bit of preference. I do hear that Facebook has brought back scheduling posts, which means you can actually plan all those out so that nobody has to think about it, which is especially helpful if your event is running overnight for the time of the person who would normally be doing that. During your event, to make your Facebook event work best, it's helpful to turn on post approval. Just make sure whoever's creating reminders is a co-host. It just keeps things a little bit cleaner. Unfortunately, one of the things about Facebook is it decides what people can see, and you don't really have a lot of control over that. So it's extremely important to have a website. Creating your website, you can keep all of your information really easy to find, and you have one spot that you can just refer people to, whether they use Facebook or not. And you can usually embed a live Google Calendar on your website really easily so that any updates, especially if you have a complicated class schedule, are really easy to happen in real time. So this is just a little shot of the one we made for virtual 12th night, which Finna and I were the stewards for, but the one for this event is also another Google site that uses a lot of those same tools.
All right, okay, so you have one more question.
All right, then we're going to schedule.
Okay. Where would you go to make a website? Like if I'm not on Facebook, I wouldn't know where to start.
Oh, to make a website. So if you are on Google, so if you have a Gmail account through Google, or if your kingdom does emails through a Google Suite, if you go up to that little grid that we looked at when we looked at the tools in Google, literally you can click on sites and it will allow you to make a site. It doesn't have a great catchy name, but that's fine if you're just sharing a link. The other option that a lot of folks have done sort of in earlier events was if there is somebody in your group that hosts a blog and is a little bit tech savvy, they might be able to make you a sub page off of their own domain that you can then edit and put your information on. So there are a lot of options there, and you can also absolutely reach out to your kingdom web minister and say, hey, we're planning this event and we know that we really need a website to be able to communicate with people. Can you help? And usually they are able to help out with that. Okay, so that we don't lose our time, let's schedule an event. So the first component when we are scheduling this here imaginary event, and again, I do apologize, all the times are in daylight savings, we'll live. So the first step is to choose your time frame. You probably have the dates, but when you start and when you end, and the time frames in which you offer content really impact who can participate. So I took that little grid from World Time Buddy and I pasted a couple together so I could get a good shot that gave us good markers for basically the known world. So we've got San Francisco here standing in for our West Coast kingdoms. There's lots of them. We have New York standing in for our East Coast kingdoms. Obviously, all the other North American kingdoms are going to be somewhere in between. We have Munich, that is just standing in for Drakenwald. We've got Bangkok, Thailand, that is standing in for the Far West. And we have Sydney standing in for Lockhawk, although I will say that both Drakenwald and Lockhawk are spread out, I think, across about 3 hours worth of time zones. So this is just giving us broad strokes, but you can kind of see there isn't any time when all 5 of these are going to be during reasonable waking hours, right? Just not happening. So you have to kind of pick and choose what is going to be the most logical for the audience, but also for your resources who you have participating. If you want to run things in a way that you're going to be really far outside the time zone of the hosting, like where you personally are, you want to find partners to work with you that are in other places. So I personally am a big fan of a Saturday event. And I want people to have that experience. So usually here on the West Coast of North America, I will start an event on Friday afternoon. Yes, it's a little bit early for folks here, but folks can start joining after they get off of work. But if I start in the afternoon, so during the summer at 4 p.m. on the West Coast, well, I guess all the time. Anyways, if I start in the afternoon on the West Coast, that is evening for those East Coast folks. It's the middle of the night and early in the morning for Drakenwald and the Far West. That just is what it is. But it is morning on the following day, so on Saturday for Lockhawk. So that's a really nice place to start. And when you think about if we're going across kind of that 24-hour, as we move on in this day, so probably our East Kingdom folks, our East Coast kingdoms are going to start things off. They're going to start going to bed. Our West Coast folks are going to be getting up. out or getting off of work and they're going to help take over. Our Lockhawk folks, this is their Saturday event. They're going to be going through. As they move on and folks in North America start going to bed, our folks over in the far west are going to start getting up and being ready to participate. As things move on, maybe the folks in so the folks in Drachenwald are going to start getting up, and they have a lot of lovely crossover here where it works for all three of these places. It doesn't work for North America. So this is sort of if you can hand the baton between folks in different kingdoms, that can really help you schedule an event that's going to be accessible to people all around the world. Okay, so once you've chosen your time frame, being aware of your goal, of your resources, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to start collecting class info. And so you're recruiting teachers. What you're going to want to do is actually make a Google form. So in that little grid, we chose forms. It's actually going to let me make a questionnaire with all the information. I'm going to go into the settings and I'm going to say collect email addresses because I want a way to contact people. I'm going to choose what I need to know. And I want to be really thoughtful about what I need to know. So I probably want to know their SCA name as it should appear, their kingdom. I probably want to know their mundane name. For our purposes here, the really key thing I need to know is where they live, city, state, country. I want to know when they're going to be available, right? And in their local time, I just want them to tell me, oh, I could teach after 4 on Friday. Right? I don't want them to have to try and figure out what that means to me. Just want them to tell me. And so once I have figured out what I need to know on this survey sheet, their class name, description, yada, yada, yada. And I am ready to start sharing this to all the places I might find teachers. I'm going to click send. It's going to ask me if I want to email it. And I'm like, well, I don't have anybody's email addresses, so no. So you can actually get a link, that link, which you can shorten. You'll actually then use that and paste it into all your Facebook posts, onto websites, Kingdom newsletter, whatever it is, so that people can click on that and go in. You do want to make sure that if anything down here in require sign in is checked, that you uncheck it. That will just depend on the setup of your account. So once folks have started submitting responses, you can view the responses. And so when you click on responses, you'll get sort of some gobbledygook where it's like, oh, 6 people said this. And you're like, that's not helpful. So what you'll want to do is click this little insignia here, which is a little, green cross, and that will open it as a Google Sheet. In this case, you can see it's still accepting responses. When you were done accepting responses, you can toggle that off. You can make the sheet at any time. Google will continue to update that for you. So if there are new responses, those will get added to that sheet that you have already generated. So it is live. Okay, so this here is the export from that little form that I made. This is very simplified. So the next thing that you want to do once you have closed your class submissions and you're ready to start scheduling. So we're at the scheduling phase now. Very exciting. So I took this and I dumped it into Excel because I don't really like Google Sheets. I'm a heavy Excel user, so I don't understand how it works. That is me. You could use whatever spreadsheet functionality, like whatever spreadsheet program works for you. So what I have done is I have added some columns that are going to be our kind of scheduling workbook columns. And I added a little bit at the top. So I know that in this case, my imaginary event is held out of Vontier because I made this for an Vontier Collegium. And I've got somebody that I'm working with in Lockhawk. So I know that I want to think about those 2 time zones anytime I'm thinking about something. So this is my event time. Oh, sorry. goodness. So this is my event time zone. That should probably be whoever's making the schedule, their time zone. Makes it easier. My alternate is going to be, wherever, like the other place I know I have resources, I can add as many of those as I want. You might just color code them as you go. So I have teacher time. That's going to be the teacher's local time for their class. The UTC adjustment column here is going to be our teacher's UTC adjustment. We're not populating these. Yes, we're just making them. I've got time UTC, time event. I keep doing that. I'm sorry. Alternate time event. Those are actually calculated. So they're really easy to have. I have a column for classroom. When I was thinking about this, breakout rooms didn't exist yet. So having that kind of classroom A, classroom B is a thing. So depending on how things structure for your event, that may be different. Facilitator, every single class needs a facilitator, even if they don't use them. And then like meeting link, and then class number is really helpful if you have a lot of classes, so you're not always trying to refer to them by name. And the other thing you're going to do at this point is that you're going to do some basic data cleanup. Most of that is going to consist of things like everybody typed their SCA kingdom in differently, right? And so some people just put East and some put East Kingdom and some people put Kingdom of the East. So you're just going to make those all the same, whatever format you want. Because this spreadsheet is actually where you're going to get all of your stuff that goes into your website, into your schedule, all of that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, the next step, is we are going to, and this is a manual process, we're going to look at each of our instructors, where they live. I just plug them each in. I put UTC in that World Time Buddy and I mark that as home. And then I plug in each person's city that they live in and figure out what their UTC adjustment is. Okay. And again, these are daylight savings time. Right. So I've got their UTC adjustment. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm looking at their availability and I'm going to give them a time. At this point, the super important thing to make this not overwhelming is that I just don't think about conflicts. I don't care. All I'm doing is assigning them a time that they have said works for them. I'm using a really, really specific format here, which is a date and time. The reason that we're doing that is because I figured out finally how to make Excel calculate. We have to have the time and date in order to go across the international date line, which I don't want to have to manually figure out what all of our adjusted times are. So it's way easier if Excel does that for you. Doing this little bit of extra work to type in the time and date is allows us to actually make Excel do the work. So once I've done that and I've just assigned randomly everybody a time that works, I am using a function which is the time that I have typed in as their time. And then it is times this number, I don't know why. And then times whatever is in this cell, negative. Okay. I know it's random, but that actually converts it. And I will have, and if you are working through this process, you can 100% feel free to reach out to me and I will help you get this set up. I also am happy to send you the sample spreadsheet so that you can see how all that works. But I have basically plugged that in. The reason that I have included UTC in here, I don't have to, but I did that because that again gives me that continent view, because I have a time in North America as my event time, a time in Lockhawk as my alternate event time. UTC gives me a stand-in for Drachenwald, and that kind of gives me a view all the way across, which is really helpful. So once I've put in and I've mocked in just these are times that work for the teachers, I'm going to go in and I'm going to sort it by event time. And I'm going to see, I put in random times, but some of them are going to end up being the same time, even if it is like on different days. That is just how international dates work. So I have 2 classes, one in New York and one in California, and I put them at 1 p.m. and at 10 a.m. But when I converted everything to Pacific time, they both ended up being at 10 a.m. It's way too, it hurts your brain to try and figure out those conflicts at this point. It's so much easier not to worry about them, get to this point and go, oh, okay, I don't have 2 classrooms at that moment. I only have 1. So I have to change my schedule. So you can see up here, I switched them and I said, oh, you know what? Instead of having teaching at 1 and 2, this person is going to teach at 2 and 3. So the other thing that you want, so you need to understand your resources at that point, and where they are. The other thing that you should really, really learn from past, especially early virtual events, is to make sure that you have moderators. Recruit your support staff at the same time as you're recruiting your teachers. You're going to need them. Okay, so the next thing I do, I've got that all in a spreadsheet. I think I've gotten rid of any conflicts. I think I've taken care of all of my resources, but it's really hard to see. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to make a calendar, and that's going to give us a different way to visualize it. And eventually that will be our kind of shareable calendar that's really easy for people to see. You can give information as a spreadsheet, sure. It doesn't work very well on cell phones. So if people are accessing your website through a mobile device, they can't see those spreadsheets. If you paste a grid onto a website, they don't work very well. The calendars just format a lot better in mobile. Okay, so we're gonna make a calendar. Really important to know, if you are making a Google Calendar, which is what I recommend using, you have to be on a computer. You cannot create a new calendar on a mobile device, but once you've created it, and make sure that you have allowed whatever account you are logged in on your mobile device using to edit it, then you're able to actually view it and edit it on your mobile device, which is great during an event when you're in a Zoom and you need to fix something, you can pull it up on your phone really quick, which is nice. So when you're in calendars, you go to other calendars, add, you're going to put in your basic information, make sure you make it public and they can see the details but not edit. This is also where you will get a link when you want to share the calendar. And you can share it with your event staff, people who are authorized to make changes. In here. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to actually take all of that information that you have on your spreadsheet and you're going to throw it on your calendar. One of the things I did to make life easier for me is I've color coded my classrooms. In my imaginary world, I have two people supporting classrooms. One is in North America and one is in Australia. So I want things to be in decent times. So I have actually, Google lets you display multiple time zones as a setting. So I actually have North America, daylight savings time, and Australian Eastern time right here. And so I'm saying, okay, so classroom 1, clearly that's in North America. Classroom 2, that's in Sydney. And classroom 2, I don't want to schedule something in it at 5 a.m. their time. I want to start scheduling there at 9 a.m. their time. So that helps me have a good delineation. I put the information for each class in there. I have taken that information by using a concatenation in Excel to mash together a lot of those responses from my teacher. And then I don't have to do a lot of like separate copying and pasting. I just get the one thing and throw it in there. That is kind of not something everybody knows how to do, but again, it is something that if you are like, I really feel like Excel should do that, reach out because somebody probably knows how.
We're at a
So,
15-minute timeline until the
okay,
next class starts.
thank you. Okay, so step 7, have your teacher, before you publish your calendar to like put it on your website, you want your teachers and your event staff to review the schedule. I recommend, and because Google calendars are wonky for people, if they're not using a computer, you want to just be prepared to share both the spreadsheet version and the calendar version. A Google Sheet is a really great way to do that in case there are updates. But first have your event staff look, and they're just going to look like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. They're going to give sort of the making sense thing. I found this really helpful when I was scheduling folks who I wasn't real familiar with the content of what they were doing. So I didn't know that these 2 classes would have like really the same people would want to take them. So have somebody take a look at that kind of stuff, then have your teachers look at times to make sure that you didn't accidentally put them at 2 a.m. and have them look at the descriptions of their class at that point in case they got it kind of wonky on the Google form. At this point, of course, if you do need to reschedule, make sure you're talking to everybody. Okay, so once you've done that and you feel good about it, you can add it to your calendar. Make sure that you do have your moderators scheduled for every single class. Don't plan yourself if you are kind of the scheduling guru. Don't plan your event steward, your very core people. Make sure they're not moderating. They should be able to float instead of being kind of stuck somewhere where they can't address an emergency per se. One other really important thing as you start communicating things to your teachers, make sure that they understand that they need to share the website or maybe the Facebook event, not like share direct Zoom links to their classes, because if something goes awry and that needs to be remade, they could have shared it to people who then can't participate because they can't find it. So that's just a note from experience. Okay, so we have actually made a schedule. That was our objective. So I have just a few little things. So during your event, say you get to a point where you do need to make an adjustment. If you've set yourself up sort of similarly to how I have set this out, where you have a Google Calendar that is embedded on a website that you're directing people to look at, which is exactly how this event that we're at right now is designed. If you need to make a change on the fly, you have a teacher who has a really bad tech problem and you need to reschedule their class to tomorrow, you can like do that right then. And that will then update it for anybody who's looking at the website, which is super nice. If you do cancel a class or reschedule a class, I highly recommend leaving it on the calendar, marking it as canceled or marking it as rescheduled so that people can really easily reference. If they had looked before and been like, I know I have a class at 1 and then all of a sudden it's not there, you get a lot of questions. During your event, in this case, because now we have breakout rooms, we have a lobby, but you should have either a lobby or social area that is open for anybody. It's really, really easy to find so that your least tech savvy person can just kind of click and show up and have that person help them. And it's a really good place for like your scheduling person, your event steward, your like core team to hang out, because they're going to be able to step away really easily if something comes up. And then just recognize sometimes it feels less than helpful when you're just sitting there by yourself, but I've feedback on every virtual event that I've been to was that was actually really meaningful to know where to go to get help. So that's literally all I have. I'm going to stop sharing. And I wanted to see if people have questions, if there were questions in chat. that,
I asked most of them during your thing.
perfect. Oh, we have Blue here. Blue, since you are in the West Kingdom, if you need a website for an event, Elsie. Elsie can help you get one that is visible to everybody and has a westkingdom.org address. So we don't always make them for things that we could. For example, it doesn't seem unreasonable that we might have, you know, some resources for accessibility that that somebody has control over, and so we can use our resources that we have access to, and Elsie is a good one. People can feel
Yeah, I
free to
love
unmute,
Elsie.
right? And folks can feel free to unmute if you have anything. I know that's like a lot of information, but I do
have
also
a question that's a little, it's not off topic, but it's a little specific. Is that okay?
yeah.
I am trying to set up a cultural event inter-kingdom. So I'm going to be scheduling between the time zones. And when I go to set this up, I'm really curious as to how you break it down, because I have moderators from different time zones. I have interpreters in different time zones. Sorry, needed emissaries. I'm not supposed to say that. Needed emissaries from different time zones. We have support staff and tech people, and nobody lives in the same place.
That is exactly what I came across for
how do you even start to
Iberian
make all
event.
that mesh? Like, I saw the graph, but I mean, it's all Greek.
If you have you made a survey for people to submit information?
No, I did it the old-fashioned way because I'm used to like people. So literally I have email, and I have the text message group chat that I started. But as far as like setting it up in Google, I didn't even know how to start because it's just so much bigger. I mean, the internet is huge.
I would be very, very happy to help you with that if you would like help with that. The key things are
just to get it started. Like your graph is beautiful, and open up a spreadsheet, and I'm like, I don't even know how to start, like what to ask people. Like, how do I even start? Because it's just so much bigger than any event.
Yeah, and those are the things that I've been doing, which are really, it's different, right? When you're like, okay, I have people teaching from 12 time zones, and I have people attending in 18 time zones, and I have people moderating in another 6 time zones. How do I put that together? So I think the first step,
it's just overwhelming.
no, and that's why we have to break it down. So I think the first step is to create a Google form so that you can say, hey, can everybody please fill this out? And that to give you all your base information. And that's where we get all of our data to be able to move forward. If you have a good idea of the things that you need to include, I really am happy to help with getting that foundation. I am really, really passionate about making virtual events accessible. Obviously, it would be a lot easier to talk about this in Google Meet or somewhere that has closed captioning for us.
No, thank you.
Zoom is very easy to use. It is missing this really important component of closed captioning.
And as you got about 5 minutes till the next class.
Mhm. So it does, Blue, I think we are probably Facebook friends, but I'm not sure. My name on Facebook,
Yeah.
and also if anybody needs to contact me, is Tiffany Ballard.
Yeah, it's BLUE Aldrich,
BALL. Yeah,
ALDRICH.
yeah. I think we are connected. Let's make a date to talk
I'm
about
looking for
it.
you right now.
Let's make a date, you and I, to talk about this in Google Meet, where we have closed captioning.